Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CSE Tech Talk podcast. My name's Garrett Helms,
And I'm Savanna Whittaker.
and today we have a special guest with us, Landon Shumway. Landon's actually an alumni of BYU-Idaho. Landon, how you doing?
Hey, great, Garrett. Glad to be here.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before we get into it?
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, I'm a BYU-I alumni. Graduated back in 2019 um, with a degree in software engineering. And during my time there, probably the most interesting thing to note is I founded the BYU-I Society for Artificial Intelligence, which I believe now has been merged with the Data Science
Yes.
Society, which that's great. I'm sure ChatGPT had a lot of help with making that more popular. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there was, in fact, the reason we started that society was OpenAI had just like become a thing. Elon Musk had started it back in the day, and we just saw the potential of this is going to be big in the future. So, but yeah, after I graduated, I've worked a number of jobs. Started out with FamilySearch actually as a software developer on their platform team. So I was there for about 4 years with them. And since then, I've had opportunities to work for a number of companies. I worked with last year a Fortune 500 company. That was a really great experience, just getting to see just how big software can get. And right now, I'm working with a smaller consulting firm, just designing architectures in Amazon Web Services. So that's a bit
That's
of my
very
background.
cool.
So, as far as the web services, I think you had a question about that, right?
Yeah, I wanted to know what that process was like because I feel like there's like so much information and like there's no right way to do it. But I am curious like how and like what steps you took to get an AWS certification.
Yeah, and it's an interesting journey because when I started out, obviously at the time, I don't know if they teach this in BYUI courses now, but Amazon Web Services wasn't really part of the curriculum. But it's huge, right? Anyone that does software or is planning to do web development will, at one point or another, you're going to get exposed to it. It's the biggest platform right now for hosting, web apps. And so I started off with FamilySearch. They used Amazon Web Services as part of their architecture, so that's how I got introduced to it. And as time went on, and I just got more exposure to it, I thought, this would be really good for me to specialize in. Um, and part of that specialization, I decided to get a certification. So they have a number of certifications you can go for. And the one I chose for was for solutions architect. So that's you're specializing in how do I design an architecture in the cloud that can scale with increased traffic and be able to be secure from any bad actors. And it was a really great experience. If anyone's interested in doing certifications with Amazon, I highly recommend. His name's Stephen Marek. He does courses in Udemy, and he
Oh,
has a fleet of courses that he walks you through, like from start to finish. Even if you have very little experience in the cloud, like just getting you up and running with everything you'll need to know to pass those exams. And so I studied full time for that for about a month, just
Wow.
40 hours a week. It's pretty
wow.
intense. Yeah, they're pretty serious as far as like the requirements to pass. And so, but once I was done with that, I just registered. There's test sites all over the country that you could go
Mhm.
and you just take an exam, and most of it's multiple choice. And yeah, I passed the certification, and which actually helped me land my current job with this consulting firm. They were looking for someone specifically with that certification. So it's definitely something to help you stand out from a crowd.
Mhm.
If if you're looking for that kind of field, looking for web development, it's definitely something I would suggest looking into. So.
Very cool. And so is the testing kind of like if you were to take the SAT, where you go in and it's timed?
Yes, yeah. So it's a timed. You have to get. I think it's like basically 80%. You have to get a certain number of points out of the total to pass.
Okay.
It's a pass fail, and
Oh,
so yeah, they don't really have a grade like, oh, you got a certification, but you were a D. Like
you're
it's you
right.
either got you either get it or you don't.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's I feel like if you take the time to prepare, it's really not that big a deal. Like a lot of it is just memory, like just memorize all the different parts that you need to know about the architecture, and
Hmm.
uh, it's pretty easy once you study for it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that insight. And I really appreciate you bringing up the Udemy course. That's really beneficial.
Yeah, what was the guy's name that you mentioned for the Udemy course?
I'm pretty sure it's Stephen Marek.
Okay.
I'm not sure how you spell that. I have to, I'm sure you can find it. He's very popular.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think he has a course for every certification that AWS offers.
Wow.
So
Wow.
whatever you're
Okay.
interested in.
And you did like the architect course, right?
That's right. Yeah, the solutions architect.
Solutions.
They have a developer course. They just opened one up for generative AI, or
Mhm.
like I don't remember the exact title for it, but like it's just working with LLMs and things like that.
Okay.
Um, and then they have secure. They have really specialized things if you want to go to networking or security. So there's all kinds of options based on what your preference is.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that is really cool. So you said you worked with FamilySearch for 4 years, and then you've worked with other companies since then. What would you, what is like your, how would you say this? How long have you been in software at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, if you count my internship, I interned with Family Search back in 2018, and so that's been about 6 years now. And so yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. The field's changing constantly, even
Yeah.
Mhm.
since I've started. Uh, Probably the biggest thing is just obviously with generative AI. I use it every day. It's just it gets my job done so much faster
Yeah.
because I can prompt it what I need to write and any language that I need it in, and it can just spit it out. Now, it's not perfect. People always complain like all the LLMs, they introduce bugs into it, but that's where the human comes in, right? So me as the engineer, it gives me a starting point to get all the boilerplate, all that code that you generally don't want to waste time writing,
Mhm.
and then I can get in the pieces that really matter to get everything working. And it's a game changer. So
Yeah, and actually here at the school, they have been implementing AI quite heavily in a lot of
Yeah.
the courses. So that's really interesting. So in this 6 year period, you've worked with a lot of companies. And I know we talked earlier, you wanted to talk about, kind of like work-life balance and understanding your value as an employee. Do you think you could get deeper into that for us?
yeah, definitely. Well, like I've had several people, since I've been in the field, they say, how do you do software development? Like how uh, what's the best way to get kick started off in your career? And the interesting thing about like finding your value as an employee is recognizing that you uh, you really are a business in a way. Like when you go to a potential employer, um, the relationship you have between you and that employer, you should really treat it like a business where you operate with you offer services. You should have your operating hours in mind, right? Like, I don't think it's beneficial for anybody to burn themselves out working, weekends, sacrificing family time, just for the sake of climbing the corporate ladder, right? There's a lot of ways to be successful without having to sacrifice your personal life.
Mhm.
Um, and so when you treat yourself with the mindset that I'm a business, um, when you're working with clients, you have to set limitations. You have to set expectations of the relationship you hope to achieve between you as a business and your employer as the one who's obviously paying you for your time. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? So as part of the skills and the services you provide, you should consider, how am I going to specialize as a business, right? How do I differentiate myself between all the other software developers or whatever field you're in, hardware? And if you could find a way, so for example, that's why I went for the AWS certification, is this is a way I could differentiate myself. This is a service I know, like I'm certified. This is what I specialize in. That's kind of my, uh, the differentiating factor when I'm talking to clients to build that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. So you're basically taking a freelancer's concept or a freelancer's perspective in the corporate world. You're kind of an employee, a software employee, kind of sells themselves like a freelancer with that mindset going into interviews. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the important thing to understand is you have just as much right to good working conditions with your employer as your employer has a right for you to offer your skill set. And so I think a lot of times, you hear about our grandparents' generation, they would go into a company and like that was their company for life. Like
Yeah.
they would just, whatever, like the company, however they were treated, they just like stuck with it, right? And I don't think that's the right mindset for our generation. If you find yourself in a position where you're not happy with your working conditions, maybe your boss is very demanding of your time, you find yourself you're working overtime, especially if you're salaried, right? One of the things I learned early on in my career is like you got to be really careful with salaried positions because obviously you don't get paid for overtime. And so it's very important to set boundaries with your manager. And a lot of that comes from setting, you'll be estimating things. If you're in an engineering field, you have to estimate how long you think something's going to take. And you just have to go up front with them, like about those estimates. Um, and when you set those clear expectations, it's a sign of strength and professionalism. I think a lot of people are afraid that if they don't say yes to everything their employer asks of them, that it puts them at risk of losing that position. And really, just the opposite is true. When you set yourself as a professional with clear boundaries, and then you make sure you live up to those expectations, that's your employer can trust you, and that's the best way to build the relationship with them. But yeah, what I'm suggesting is when you treat yourself like a business, if you think about a business, like you have your stakeholders, and your stakeholders are you and your family, right? And in any business, stakeholders come before your client. And
Right.
so you need to be considering the needs of your stakeholders before that of your client. And if your client is demanding too much of you and they're not compensating you fairly for the skills that you're bringing to that relationship, then it's time for you to look for other clients. And my suggestion for really anyone in the tech field is you should really be looking every 2 years for another position with another company if you care about like advancing yourself in a career. Because if you don't, you risk yourself getting pigeonholed into certain skills. Like if you just kind of like stick with one job and they do things a certain way and that's all you ever like expose yourself to, it'll make it harder for you to be able to find out other opportunities in the future.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things you got to consider with when you have that relationship with your employer. It's not, they don't hold all the chips. Like you should definitely be in a position to bargain how you're treated in your work environment.
And I guess one of the questions I have for that, I feel like some of us might be worried about like the delivery. Like, how do I, like, as a freshly grad, like come in being like, I need to set boundaries with my employer, even though like I'm just starting out, like I am a fish in the sea. And so, how can I communicate those in a way that shows that strength and professionalism?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the important thing, again, it just comes to expectations when you're in the interview process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're looking, and again, it also depends on what you really want out of your career. because some people are okay working weekends. Some people really enjoy the work that they do and they find great value. I know when I started with FamilySearch, I worked a lot of weekends, but it wasn't really mandated. It was something that like, oh, I have this thing I need to deliver. I'm gaining really, valuable skills
Hmm.
by practicing and like delivering this on time. And I felt that was valuable, especially in the beginning, because like uh, obviously, yeah, there's a lot for you to learn, and sometimes that's going to take more than 40 hours a week to get those skills, and
Right.
that's okay. Just watch for burnout. If it's something, again, every time I worked weekends, it was generally out of choice because there was something that a skill I wanted to develop, or I just felt like I wanted to keep that commitment, and it wasn't imposing on time with my family.
Hmm.
And so you really have to define what do you want out of your career, what are you comfortable with, um, and I think if you stand for that and you make that clear to your employer before they hire you, most will respect that because they want that too. Most people like they want their weekend time to spend with their families or whoever, and
Right.
so I think it's just important to be upfront about that and don't be afraid to set boundaries for your time. Um,
Mhm.
and if it's the kind of company that's going to run you to the ground, because there are plenty of those, then it's probably not the right company for you if that's not what you're looking for.
Mhm.
So
So what about a situation where there's somebody they've come into this job and all of a sudden they're making more money than they've ever seen in their lives, but they're working 60 plus hours a week, their family never sees them, but all of a sudden they feel like they've made it. What would be your advice to someone like that?
it's so funny you asked me that because that was me last year. So I was working for a Fortune 500 company. I won't name the name,
Okay.
but their business practice was to run their developers into the ground because
Mhm.
there was a line of them out the door ready to replace you at any moment.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, and it was rough. It was really rough. And I was making more money than I ever could have dreamed of. Especially, like wasn't a millionaire or anything, but like it was more than what I needed to live comfortably,
Right.
right? And at some point, and this is going to sound crazy for people who haven't experienced this, but at some point, money just becomes a number in a bank account. Once you've met, and that's going to be different for everybody, right? Some people they want Ferraris and like toys and things like that, and each to their own. But I got to the point where I was like, okay, I have all this money, but I'm absolutely miserable in this job.
Mhm.
And my quality of life with my family, I was stressed all the time, and that impacted my relationship with my kids and my wife. And it got to the point where it's like, is this worth having that number in my account, right? And eventually, I got to the conclusion that it wasn't, and so I ended up looking for other positions. And again, it just comes down to what you define as success in your career, because that's going to be different for everybody. And the biggest piece of advice I could give for that is don't look to others for your personal definition of success. Like
Mhm.
if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, because like they look successful, but like you're stretching yourself thin trying to do that, like whose dream are you really living? Right? Like
Uh,
it's not
Right.
yours, it's somebody else. And so you have to find that for yourself. Now some people maybe they like getting run into the ground and they like making all that money. And again, more power to them. But you should definitely I don't think it's right to stay with the position just for the amount of money that you make. I think, with the time that you have on this earth, you should be enjoying that 40 hours or however much you put in for your career. I really think like if you can find that job that you're like, I actually enjoy coming to work, then that's success for me personally. That's my definition. And right now with this consulting firm, like I've found that position. Like I love coming into work. I love meeting with clients and just talking with them about their needs and being able to design architecture. It's really fun. And
Mhm.
so that to me, I took a pay cut to take this position, but I enjoy life way more than I was at that other position. So you have to
Absolutely.
decide that for yourself, what you're looking for.
Mhm. And I really find that helpful because I feel like that can be a common thing, especially in software where everything's constantly chasing. So you feel like you have to like continue chasing that success. But being able to step back and be like, okay, like what am I comfortable with at the end of the day? What can I be proud of? That's really important and insightful to have in the back of your mind.
Yeah, for sure. And we always think of like, oh, in the future I'll be happy. Like I'm making all this money now, so that in the future I'll be happy. And like, don't wait till you're 55, 60 to enjoy your life, right?
Right.
Like now you can enjoy life while you're working. Work doesn't have to be a drag. Now, again, it took me a lot of job searching to get to this point now. I had to jump through several companies before I found one that was a good fit. Um, but you can't let fear hold you back of like, oh, what if I can't find another job, right?
Mhm.
You just, while you're working, you do that grind at night, whenever you have to do it to find another position. And eventually you'll find, something that's a good fit. I truly believe that.
Absolutely. And so now that you're at your consulting job, what does the like day in the life look for you as a AWS and working with architectural design? What's a day like for you?
Yeah. So in the morning, generally we'll meet with clients that we're building some sort of app for.
Hmm.
We'll gather requirements for them. It gets pretty crazy sometimes. They don't know what they want and they change their mind constantly. That's why I never worry about AI taking our jobs because like humans will never be able to give clear requirements on what they actually want. So you're never
Hmm.
gonna be able to prompt ChatGPT to build something for you because they'll just change it constantly. But you get your requirements from them, and then you design an architecture that meets their needs, that's secure. Um, you'll review the design, usually through wireframes or like, this is what we could build for you. And then once they approve the design, you're off to the races. I get to write way more code now than I did at previous positions, which is really fun. Like that's my favorite part of the job, honestly. Um, and then yeah, we develop in an agile manner where we deliver,
Yeah.
within every week sprints, and we show
Hmm.
this is what we built, and then they say, yeah, we want all this changed, and you start over again. But yeah, that's generally just the process of day to day.
Okay, that's really awesome because project management is one of the certificates we can get in software engineering. And so I'm also curious, so working with Agile, like what do you think like some of the skills for people who may want to like work for a consulting company, what should like some soft skills be that they should offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. You need to know how to give the client what they want in as least effort as possible.
Hmm.
So if you ask the client, like, hey, think of a car, like, what features do you want in the car? They're going to tell you, well, I want everything. And you're like, okay, that's going to be $200,000. I can't afford
Right.
that. And so really what you want to do, instead of asking, what do you want? One of the skills is guiding them to be like, well, here are some of the basic offerings that we could do just to get you off the ground. You're always trying to shoot for minimum viable product of
Right.
like, these are the basic features you actually need to get value out of this product. And then we can add all the trimmings.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's definitely a soft skill because some clients they think they know what they want and they're just really like pushing for particular things, and you have to walk them through. Okay, well this is the budget that you're set aside for this. Let's see how we can actually make it happen.
Hmm.
And then being able to slice to deliver milestones. That's really, really hard actually, because you go to design and you're like, well, I got the website up, I gotta have like all this stuff.
Hmm.
And so, but being able to pick out, well, we could just have like the loading page and just show that we did that in a week, right? And
Wow,
it's just
yeah.
the loading page, but here it is.
Hmm.
And that way it's more, that's agile, is where you're breaking it into little pieces that are deliverable within 1 to 2 week time spans.
Okay, that's really good. And so from your experience, has there been a project that you've worked on that just has like stood out to you as or has been like resume worthy and has helped you start conversations during interviews?
Yeah, so when I was with FamilySearch, which that was honestly one of the best companies I worked for, by the way. It was just a really good culture, work environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the opportunity to work with a pretty big team. There was like 9 of us, and we built kind of like a engineering portal. So like employees that would come into FamilySearch, they need to get access to all kinds of tools as part of their jobs. And they need to
Mm-hmm.
do that in a secure way so that you don't just give everybody access to everything. And
Right.
so one of the tools that I helped build with the platform team was this engineering portal where they would actually request access to, I need this AWS account. I need to get into like these different environments. And then it would go through a whole flow like auditing system with their managers to be able to like say, yeah, you actually do need that. And like it would, and then on the back end, it would like wire everything up so that they just magically got access to everything they needed.
Uh-huh.
It's like you take that kind of stuff for granted, but there's a lot of work that goes into making that possible in a secure way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, yeah, that was probably one of my favorite projects to work on, mainly just because the team. Um, that's another thing I'd say that really helps you stand out. Is are you fun to work with? Like,
Mm-hmm.
will
Yeah.
your coworkers actually enjoy spending time with you, or are they just going to be like, it's just going to be a drag every time they gotta, jump on a call with you for something? If you can make life more pleasant for them to work with you, uh, it'll really help you in your career to be able to make connections, and opportunities for the future. So,
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is a lot of really good information, Landon. And we're
Yes.
really grateful that you were able to come on today. It was nice having you on. We're
Yes.
grateful that you were able to come. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.